This is Mark, and you are back with AM 970 WAMD. My name is Mark, and we have on the phone with us a gentleman that I think has a very, very interesting story. 15 years ago, he was released from Marion Supermax Federal Prison on a narcotics charge, and we're going to talk to Joel Blaeser, and we're going to find out his feeling on not only the war on drugs, but also his time in prison and what he learned from that. Good morning, Joel.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on. You're calling from Wisconsin, is that correct?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin, yes.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So it's about an hour earlier, I guess, there.
Yes.
It is. Now, you spent, according to your biography, you spent 15 years ago, you spent time in Marion Federal Penitentiary. Marion is not your local lockup. It's not your detention center. Marion is a federal penitentiary. Is that correct?
Yes. At the time, it was a Level 6 Supermax Federal Prison. It was the only one of its kind at that level and was opened up as a result of Alcatraz closing in 1963, and it was designed for the worst of the worst. So it was the premier place, if you will, for the most hardened criminals.
Now, you said level 6. How many levels of federal penitentiaries are there, Joel?
There's actually 6.
I think there's 6.
Yes.
And I think 6 is the highest. In other words, it's a supermax. It's a high security penitentiary.
Yes, it's a 22-hour lockdown prison. You have 3 guards with you at any time you're taken out of your cell. You're shackled on the ankles and handcuffed behind the back. And you spend 22 hours a day in your cell. The meals are brought to your cells. Just very secure prison.
Why were you sentenced to Marion?
Now, originally, as a first-time nonviolent deadhead, I'm getting a little echo in my phone. You're not getting that, are you?
I'm not. How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
So as a first-time nonviolent deadhead traveling around the world with the Grateful Dead, selling LSD, narcotics, went to prison as a first-time nonviolent person convicted of a consensual crime as opposed to a non-consensual crime. I was actually sent to a low facility, which would have been a level 2 with 1 fence, very lesser type of offenders in that prison. And as time went on, I didn't adjust the best in there, and there were certain situations that happened, and I was sent to another prison, and subsequently I'd actually done time in 5 prisons before I went to Marion. One time I, for good behavior, was transferred to a prison closer to my family, and home, which originally was Chicago. There were some prison riots over the drug laws in Talladega, Alabama in mid-October of 1995. It's a little bit of a story, but the riot in Talladega sparked a national riot of 13 federal prisons that simultaneously rioted over the crack law. And the drug laws in this country are very stiff and very barbaric, and that's a whole other discussion we can get in. So they changed the federal government changed the methamphetamine law, the LSD law, and the marijuana law right around that time of the riot, right before the riot. And they were getting ready to change the crack cocaine law, which was very disparate as compared to the powder cocaine law for the exact same drug. The only difference was that the crack cocaine law mainly affected black defendants, and the powder cocaine law affected white defendants. And the Sentencing Commission made a change to affect all 4 of those laws. And the LSD, the methamphetamine, and I was under the LSD law, which actually reduced my sentence by 30 months, and the marijuana law, which all affected white defendants. And then they changed the crack law, but Congress overrode it. And then at the next day, which was the day after the Million Man March, which I believe was October 16th, it was 1995, there was an incredibly brutal and heinous riot in Talladega, which was the first of 13 prisons to simultaneously riot. Now, as a result of those riots, they took 21 defendants, me being one of them, and that is the whole crux and the inspiration for me writing the book Letters from Marion, which the first chapter is free at lettersfrommarion.com. But that is when I started and why really the inspiration of me for writing that book. So they took me out of there and then sent me to Marion as the actual person who instigated and started that riot.
Okay, so that answers my question. You didn't get sent to Marion just for selling LSD and pot at a...
You could stab a prison guard, you could rob a bank and shoot 3 FBI agents, and not get sent to Marion. And the aura of Marion I learned about in the first prison that I was sent at. It was just this place to be feared and respected, that it was, there was 400 inmates that were sent there. It was the Supermax prison. John Gotti was there. If you tried to get sent there, you couldn't get sent there. So that was just, and then, again, there is a whole, it's not only because of the riot. There was an instance with a lieutenant in Talladega over a green duffel bag, which is, again, part of the story in the book, Letters from Marion. There was an interesting set of circumstances of why I truly was sent to Marion.
And it's because you said you incited they claimed you incited a riot, and they sent you...
They charged me with that charge, and in prison, that is actually a more severe charge than murder. They have these things, they're like tickets, but they call them shots. A 100 is a murder, which you will get more time for, but a 101 is inciting a riot. And the reason why in prison they consider that to even more dangerous is because if you incite a riot, you put the guards at risk in the prison, and then potentially the people living outside the prison in the free world.
I see.
And the 21 of us who were sent back to Marion, there was about 8 people that got an extra 5 to 10 years on their sentence. Now, subsequently, all the charges were dropped against me, but once you go into Marion, because it is such a secure prison that you're dealt with differently, that you are not to be released back into normal prison population until you go through their program.
How long is that? How long were you there, and how long is that program, Joel?
The program is about 36 months if you can get through it. Now, I was there for 23 months, and the only reason I was released there is because I won an appeal. I filed 4 appeals. One went to the Supreme Court, and I lost. But I had an appellate appeal at the appellate level, and I was released instantly on, I should remember that date like the back of my hand. It was September 27th of 1997.
Okay.
I was released, and that's the only reason I left there, because I probably would have been there for a number of years. It was not a nice place. But I will say this, that it was one of the greatest gifts that was ever given to me,
and you mentioned that. Explain that. Why do you call that? Because I would think going to a level 6 federal pen, Marion, has to be like a living hell.
It was, but the other prisons I was at, I wanted to get out of jail. I wanted to get out of prison, but there was just enough to keep me not focused and keep my eye on the prize. I worked out, I ate really well, I went to the law libraries, and I was bettering myself in the other prisons. But when I got to Marion, and I remember the day like it was yesterday, and they brought me to my cell, a single-man cell. They closed the bars, and I looked at this little cement slab with a 2-inch thick mat and a stainless steel toilet with a little sink.
Right.
It was about 7 by 5, and I thought, this is it. I'm either going to go insane or I'm really going to be able to focus and better myself. And when that door shut, I had about 7 years left on my sentence. I knew I had an appeal coming that I hopefully was going to get action on, but it just, why? It focused me to really want to look at where did I want to go in my life? What did I want to do, and how was I going to get there? And it couldn't get any worse, so there was almost a little bit of a relief in a way, in a weird sort of convoluted way, that it's not going to get any worse than this. There's no prison that's worse than this. There's no situation in life that can be worse than this. But I got to a place in there, meditating daily and doing yoga and, eating really good, that was just a very,
Well-
probably very similar to like a monk, except a monk, they choose to be there, and it's under a little different circumstances.
Right.
I was forced to be there. So, but really, while I was there, now this isn't something in hindsight that I look back, while I was there in that moment, it was very spiritual journey, and something that I really reveled and marveled at daily, doing journals, writing letters, and all the letters that I wrote from Marion and all my prison letters, my family saved, and the book Letters from Marion, each chapter opens up with a letter from Marion with
Right.
the actual photocopied letter. But when you see the letters, you can see, there's a range of emotions, but you do see in those letters, you're going to see anger and fear and frustration, but you're also going to see love and peace and joy.
Well,
and that
you had never been in, had you ever been in trouble with the law prior to the
never.
So here you go, you're following the dead around, and I've known people that, one man in particular, he's a friend of mine, that was at a crossroads of his life, big deadhead, followed dead around, and smart guy, really smart guy, very similar to you, I would imagine, came to a fork in the road in his life, and had an opportunity to go to Harvard Law School or to follow the dead, and he took the road to Harvard Law School, and he's a partner in a big firm here in Maryland. But you weren't in trouble before. You get caught selling LSD drugs at a dead concert. They put you into I guess like a detention center or a county lockup, and somehow they allege that you incited a riot, and you end up at a level 6 federal pen. It's just that journey is just amazing.
Story, isn't it, Mark?
It's an amazing story. It is an amazing story. Now, you say that I would think actually at a level 6 federal penitentiary, you might even be safer there than you would say at a county lockup or state pen. Am I wrong about that, or am I right? Because it's so restricted.
A county lockup is really the conditions in a county lockup, and most people are prisoners in a county lockup. It's a transient situation because you're on your way somewhere. Like if somebody has 6 months, they may get stuck in a county lockup. In county lockups, they're dirtier, they're grimier. The food is not as good. You don't get the privileges. When you're in a prison, it's like your home. The state prisons, generally, because of the state crimes, the rapists and the murders, to get sent to federal prison, you have to commit a federal crime. That's not to say there's not very, sophisticated criminals that are very heinous in prison, but generally speaking, and I've never done time in state prison, but I've talked to a lot of people in state prisons, like TDC, the Texas Department of Corrections, is really known to be a heinous place, but there's lots of murderers and rapists in there. But as far as Marion itself, every Friday night there seemed to be a stabbing or a beating. So, it was a very brutal place, but also in Marion, the prison guards. When you were, anybody that got sent to Marion when they got off the bus would get beat up by the guards. It was just sort of a token thing that would happen.
Kind of an initiation,
passage,
huh?
The initiation. But the other thing is the crossroads that you speak of with the gentleman who chose Harvard over the dead. I actually, Mark, when I was out there, I decided not to stop selling drugs and told my family I didn't want to sell drugs because I didn't want to go to prison. And my older brother, Michael, said, if you work for me for a year, a business that I had sold him earlier in life that he had grew really big, he said, I will give you half of the summer business if you work the year, and then when you work the winter, I'll give you half of the winter business.
What kind of business was that, Joel?
Landscaping in the summer and snow shoveling in the winter.
Sure.
And that, I'm sorry?
No, I was just going to say that's a good business.
And then I was, one day when Jesse came over to pick me up for work, I thought it was Jesse, the knock at the door, and there was DEA and FBI surrounded the building with drawn shotguns, and they, kicked the door open, put a gun to my face. They had an 18-count indictment from something that happened 2 years prior. They got a sealed indictment and arrested me. And then, at that point, And yes, I mean, I was guilty, and I was convicted, and I lost my jury trial, but I had stopped selling drugs and really wanted to get on with the straight and narrow. And then at that point, I just, my father had passed. He died in my arms, and one thing that he would instill upon me is to be responsible for your actions. And at that point, I could have testified or told or come up with something to get out of it, but I just felt that I did this, I had to go through this. And in the end, looking back, of course, hindsight's 20/20. I'm glad that I did. I mean, I learned so much in prison. I'm almost glad that I went. But the fact of the matter was, I'd already decided that behavior was not going to get me anywhere. I love the Grateful Dead. I still love the Grateful Dead, but I didn't want to. And so when that happened, I just felt that I couldn't put somebody in the same position that I was put in, because obviously somebody had told on me, but I did what I did, and I needed to take responsibility for it. But I'd never in my wildest dreams would have thought I would get sent to Marion, and I really didn't have a huge understanding of the drug laws at that time, and I didn't think that I would go to prison for more than 5 years. And having gotten sentenced originally to 151 months, that was actually a very low sentence for the drug laws. I mean, the drug laws in this country are so barbaric.
Well, we're going to talk about that. The person on the other line that you hear is Joel Blaeser. He's written a book, a very interesting book entitled Letters from Marion, and that's Marion Federal Pen. Arrested for drugs, eventually wound up at a level 6 federal penitentiary, Marion. Rough place, tough place. But according to Joel, he's a better man for it. Joel, you say you spent 20 months or so in a federal penitentiary, a rough and tumble federal penitentiary. I guess they all are, actually. But and you say you're a better man for it. Now, I'm sure you saw a lot. You saw fights, stabbings, possibly murder, rape, abuse by the guards, abuse by other prisoners. I don't even think about what people do to food in prison and so forth like that. How does that make you a better person?
For one, there's a good book I read when I was in prison by Bo Lozoff, We're All Doing Time. But how does it make me? One thing it does is it teaches me that time is the most valuable asset, and it also teaches you to appreciate things that you might not normally appreciate. And not that I needed that lesson, but I did need that lesson. That's where the road led me to it. And it taught me to, develop a spiritual roadmap, if you will, to live my life by. And it just, when you're in there and you get everything taken away from you, right or wrong, whether the laws are right or wrong, the laws were in place, and I knew that, I was risking this when I was traveling around with the Grateful Dead selling LSD. When you're in there, though, and everything is taken away, you just develop this appreciation for things that I didn't have, and that I still have to this day. And then it also kind of builds your character and helps you to overcome some situations that you might think are tough, especially in the country we live in. And we're pretty decadent society. And but when you take a look around the world and you see how much we really have, and that you go to some third world country, and like I was surfing in Bali a couple of years ago, and there's like one wash machine for a whole village, and but just on a daily basis, just to really be appreciative of even something as simple as fresh water or food. Not that we didn't get fresh water or decent food, but the simple things in life. But my grateful journal that I have, even to this day, always in the top 10 are 10 toes, 10 fingers, the simple things, because that's truly what makes me a rich person, is stuff like that. And I don't think I had that appreciation before I went to prison, and I definitely didn't have it before I went to Marion.
Well, let me ask you this. The day you get out of Marion, they come and they say, Joel, you're a short timer now, you've got 2 weeks, you'll be walking out that door, and you're thinking, oh my God, I just have to live the 2 weeks. I would think, so it's not going to kill me, or, I drop over dead from a heart attack or something like that. But you walk out that door that first day. Now you've been incarcerated now for
5 years, 1 month.
5 years, 1 month. The world has changed. Technology's changed. Leaders have changed. The landscape of probably where you grew up has changed. what was the first thing that you did when you walked out of that prison?
Well, I actually, they took me to court, and I walked out from the court. But the very first thing I did from the court, my brother Bradley and my mother Rosemary were there to pick me up. I walked out of the courtroom. I went in the little holding cell, and they processed me through. And but I actually walked out into this, off the court steps, just like you see on TV, and I kissed the ground.
Yeah.
And what I noticed, like the wind was blowing, and it was kissing the trees, and I just was really paid attention to that. And the smell of the exhaust was like when I was 4 or 5 years old, and when we went to the gas station to fill the gas up, and the smell of the gas was so pungent, not like before, because your senses just become so dumbed down because your mind is usually in 1,000 other places and with what you're doing.
Right.
But the very first thing I did was kiss the ground, and I just had this very deep sense of appreciation and respect for freedom and time and the simple things in life.
Did you learn any type of trade or anything like that while you were in prison? Or, I mean, you come out, they probably give you a couple of bucks to get you on your way, but it's probably a couple hundred bucks. No money. No,
not in federal prison. They don't give you anything. They used to. They stopped that.
Wow.
The state prisons, I think they do. They don't give you any money. At the other prisons, there were trades that they taught you. And the thing is, Claiborne Pell, who, God rest his soul, recently died, who came up with the Pell Grants about 40 years ago, when he came up with the Pell Grants was, subsequent to the Attica prison riot, which is a single prison riot. It was probably the granddaddy of them all for
right.
the United States. As a result of that, and just wanting to help students, but a big portion of that bill was to help people, prisoners. He came up with the Pell Grants, and he wrote that bill. And then, but the day when I came into prison and I was at Sandstone, Minnesota, I applied for the Pell Grants. I was approved for the Pell Grants, and then there was this big push for, the federal prisoners are getting too much, and the
right.
weights, and it's a country club, and this and that. So then, by the time it came time to do the correspondence classes, the Congress had shut down the whole Pell Grant system. So that stopped, which now prisons were just to house and feed, and it just became this crime school. But there were certain things in there, like you could go to the wood shop, and at one prison I worked in the leather shop, and I learned a little bit about that. And there was like maybe the cement shop, because prisoners did everything. There was a landscaping shop.
Right.
One time I was a cook in another prison, but I read a lot, and I had this sense of starting a big business when I got out, and I was the law library. Some of them are quite extensive in prison. It's actually the second largest, the second or third largest Bureau of Prisons budget expenditure next to food, because they have to have
right.
law libraries.
It's the law. Right.
There was a legal case back in the 70s that was fought, and the right to counsel.
Right. They have to have access to the law library.
To the book. So
sure.
That's what I really did to sort of better myself, is read and learn about law, and just know that when I got out, I wanted to start a business. And originally it was with the fish farms. But in Marion, there was really nothing. You had access to the law libraries and books because it was so secure. So
what? Okay, so you walk out. You have no money. Your mom and your brother are there, fortunately. What did you do? Tell me what. You probably had this in your mind what you were going to do, but I mean, I did, and then you get out to the free world, and you have all these choices, and it's just reality sets in, and it's just not that simple. It's not. I would never think it was that simple. I mean, it's almost like being dropped out of the womb at 35 years old.
Right.
So
what I did is, and my brother and mother said, hey, we don't have the playbook for this. You need to go get a job, and you got to start from somewhere. And I stayed at my brother's.
How does a con get a job?
It's hard. I went all over the city. I applied I stayed at my brother's. I applied at 30 jobs in 30 days, and I finally got a job at the Bradley Center as a stagehand. And the catering department came over, Kathy Marquardt, but don't get in trouble for saying her name, God bless her. She came over and heard my story, and she said, Joel, she said, I used to work in a halfway house. She ran the catering department, and they have these lavish parties, and she said, what you need is social massage. And she's like, I'm going to pay you a little bit more per hour, and you're going to come work for us. I think I was started at about $5.85 or $6.25 an hour.
Okay.
And she said, you're going to work for us. You need the social massage. There's going to be these big parties and these social events, and you're going to be a server. And it was amazing. And so I worked.
You know what? She was very smart. She surrounded you with people, hopefully good people, and you saw kind of like the other side of life, how life could be.
Right. Yeah. You're right. Exactly.
Right. She was very smart.
She was, because she said the stagehand, she's like, you're not going to get any social interaction. You're going to be working like a dog, and then you're going to go home and be alone.
Right. Or fall into the same trap as you did, because, I mean, I've been to 400 concerts. I've seen the stagehands, you know. You know? They're drugged up. They're drugged up, and they look like they the last time they bathed was back in the Carter administration.
Right.
You know, so. But no, she was very smart. That she put you in an environment that you wouldn't be tempted. It was good work. You had to look nice. You couldn't.
Right.
I mean, as a roadie, you usually look like a bum.
You save money. You don't have to buy soap.
Exactly, that's true. But you had to make a nice presentation. You worked decent hours, and you were surrounded by people that you got to see what life was like, without dealing drugs and without having to be on the wrong side of the law.
On the right side, yes.
Exactly. Smart woman. So how long did that last? 2 weeks? No, I'm only kidding.
No. Actually, what amazingly, having developed and cultivated some of the, or I should say implement some of the things that I cultivated in prison, these incredible disciplines, I mean, I was able to live exceptionally frugally. My mother paid the first month's rent for my apartment, which was $330, and my mother paid, or my brother paid the rent, and one paid the security deposit for the first month, and they filled the refrigerator up for food, and they said, you got to struggle.
You got a good start, though.
So then I saved and saved and saved, and every paycheck I bought a landscaping tool. I bought a lawnmower one week, and then the next week I might have bought a shovel, and I slowly built up the tools, and that was
smart.
September to maybe March, and then it's seasonal. That was the season. She said, we'll have a little work over the summer, and then in March I created a flyer, and I went up and down Lakeshore Drive in Milwaukee, going maybe 8 miles one way and 8 miles the other way, and put one in every mailbox, and then I did spring cleanups, and I just slowly started my landscaping business.
Good for you.
Also enrolled in college because I wanted to do the fish farm thing, and I had studied it in prison, and the fish farms and the pressure on the oceans, and how much fish that the world was consuming, and wanted to come up with a good organic way to produce fish. And then the second year I worked for them a couple of months, but then the landscaping business really took off, and by the second year, the second summer, I probably made $150,000. I bought a house at United States Drug Seizure Auction, of all poetic places to buy one.
There's irony there.
That is, and then my real estate career took off, and then I had stopped going to school, which was a very interesting scenario, because I had started writing reports about the drug laws and what had happened to me, and speaking at colleges. And one of my professors, Professor Abel Rampa from Ghana, and said, if you turn this into a book, I will give you an honorary degree in humanities, because I had wrote a paper about what I discussed a little bit earlier, the crack laws. But I was getting this taste of money, and I sort of wanted to forget the whole prison thing, and I sort of chose to satiate the ego a little with the material gain and just sort of live a little. And I said, I'm not ready to write that book, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready mentally.
I really don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you were in a prison for what, 50 months? You said
61 months.
61 months. 5 years, 1 month. You said,
right.
And so you did get some of the material things that you were denied all that time, like a house, and and then you could point to you literally could point to the tools of your trade, the mowers and the shovels and the plows and so forth, and that had to make you feel good.
It did. It gave me a sense of accomplishment, a sense of self-worth, and that also that really when I don't know what would have happened, and it really doesn't matter, because the day that I thought Jesse was picking me up and I would have been half owner of my brother's business, that was the path. That was just the path, that the way that it had to be, I think, for me to really. Whether it was or it wasn't, that's
the way it was.
That's the way that it was. And so, but the sense of accomplishment, and that anybody could make it in this country, and that it was a great country. And I had harbored some resentments against the government with the drug laws, and but at the end of the day, when I remember one day when I looked at my monthly statement, I had been out less than 2 years, and that month I had profited $38,000. And I remember having this red pickup truck, and I just remember, wow, I'm really doing it. This is an amazing country, and I just felt a sense of accomplishment,
sure.
And that I was becoming successful, and that it was working, and that it probably was a good thing that my brother and mother weren't rich, and they just gave me a bunch of stuff, or they probably could have given me more, but it was good that
you work for
struggle. Struggle is good.
You're listening to Joel Blaeser. He's written a very interesting book entitled Letters from Marion. That's Marion Federal Pen, and not some sort of place. Woman, right? Exactly. No, it's Letters from Marion Federal Penitentiary. Would you say you, with your success going through the federal penal system, would you say you are an exception to somebody that has gone through that and has come out? I mean, the recidivism rate is pretty high. Would you call yourself an exception, that you didn't go back into the joint and made a success of yourself?
Unfortunately, yes, but they're an exception in the sense that I bet you there's 15 to 18% of people that really become really successful really successful in the sense of, we have to define what's the success in the terms of monetary terms. You can have a lot of money, but if you're an alcoholic drunk and you're not really functioning in society, is that really a success?
Right.
Yes, I would say I'm an exception to the rule, just because the way that prisons are now, being a crime school, and that they're really not set up for you to succeed in life, and it's really a travesty, and it's very unsafe for the American people of this country, because if you send somebody to prison, that is a pit of bad and evil for 8, 9, 10 years for a consensual crime. Now, granted, it was illegal, but I sold something to someone that they wanted, as opposed to a non-consensual crime where I robbed from somebody,
right.
I stole, I shot, I stabbed. That type of person, I think the behavior in that type of person is a little more heinous. But you group all these people together, you throw them in this pit of bad and evil, and then you're just thrown out into society. That is not, it's a very barbaric and outdated modality of punishment that I think needs to be addressed, and it's not in the political discussions. And if drugs were legalized, it could create a lot of jobs. There'd be less addicts. There'd be a lot more tax revenue for the government. So, getting back to your question, Mark.
About if the majority of the people go back into the system.
The exception, yes. Right. And then the other part of that is the probation. You have these probation officers that the way that the old law and the new law works, if you have 5 years of probation and say you get caught with some marijuana and you get sent back to prison for 2 years, when you come back out, you still have to do that original 5 years of probation. Now, probation is good in a sense because it really keeps you focused and on the level, and you have to see this guy once a month and be focused with that. But getting that job. When I applied for those 30 jobs, even though you're not supposed to take that in consideration on the job application, it asks if you're a convicted felon. And it's
right.
Sort of like this don't ask, don't tell. It's technically illegal, but they still can ask, but they can't use it against you to hire you.
Yeah, well, you know how that works.
Right. And so,
Right,
and at
exactly.
the end of the day, I mean, I'm not going to lie.
No.
When I got out, and even when I had that job and I was saving money, a lot of my friends were still free. They were still selling pot, still selling drugs, and I had thoughts, but I never did it because at the end of the day, I wasn't going to risk my freedom
Right.
to
Good
do
for
it.
you.
But you take a guy maybe that did 15 years and he's 45 years old, and he comes out and he just thinks, what do I have? What can I do?
Right.
Not that he should be giving handouts, but while you're in prison, if there's nothing to better yourself,
He really in his mind he has no other way other than to go back into the old routine.
what are you going to do?
Right.
And I don't want to take that side in a sense.
Right.
But,
And I'm not condoning that. I'm just putting myself in that person's shoes. You come out, you spend 15 years behind bars. The whole world has changed. We all know how the world has changed in the last 15 years. Last 5 years things have changed. You walk out, you have no clue what's going on. Really, you really don't. People are
Right.
using words and terminology that weren't even in the lexicon 2 years ago, much less 15 years ago.
Right.
And he must scratch his head bald head and think, well, I'm scared. I have no clue even how to cope in this world. But I do know how to sell drugs, or I do know how to light a fire, rob a bank, or light a fire for an insurance money. I do know how to do that, so maybe I'll contact my old buds. And
I tell you what, I mean, if the economy ever gets really bad, I learned a lot of stuff in prison. I mean, I did. You're there. You learn things that you just like. Here's one tidbit. The United States, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for this, but the United States Postal Service actually is the largest transporter of money, more than all the other armored car services combined. And who would have thought that you see this, next time you're at a mall and you see a guy wheeling a thing that you think are bags full of mail, it could be bags full of money. And so
I know a friend who was involved in some shady deals, went to prison. Used to send cash all through the United States Postal Service, and he is probably the biggest proponent for the Postal Service. He says they never lost a package on me. True story.
No,
So
they're very efficient.
They're very efficient. He says he would send cash through the mail, and they never lost a package for him. He could go on TV and promote for him. It's interesting.
Did he got in trouble?
Yeah, he did get in trouble.
He got in trouble.
He did get in trouble. But real quickly, because we only have a couple minutes left here, Joel, a couple of states have passed. Colorado has passed marijuana decriminalization, legalization laws for small amounts. Now, the problem is those are federal laws they're bumping up against, and they're going to have to get the blessing of the federal government to enact those laws. So, are those laws just paper laws, or can?
In my opinion, no, and I don't want to take a side of politics, but the reason I wanted Obama to get reelected is because I believe, and I don't like a neocon like who was Bush's vice president? His name
Cheney.
is slipping me.
Sorry?
Cheney actually, if you look at what they believe, the neocons, they actually believe drugs should be legal, and I'm not sure what Romney's position would be, but because Obama is a second-term president, he doesn't have to worry about getting reelected.
Right.
He could do something like that and back it. But in a sense, yes, there was a show that aired on 60 Minutes about 2 or 3 Sundays ago, and they asked that exact question that you just asked, and they interviewed the prosecutor, and he said that unless somebody is, starting a grow room and, they're not selling to dispensaries, but they're selling to other people in large quantities, we will go after them.
Right.
But they're following the letter of the law. The juries, we can't get them. But to getting directly to your question about the federal government, because now the banks are saying, well, we can't take this money. So there is going to have to be some sort of federal mandate. But
right.
I've written an op-ed article for the New York Times, and I keep submitting it to them. And that's really one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is to instigate a national debate on drug law reform. It doesn't say that anywhere in the book, but when you read the story, it's really going to open up your eyes to the drug laws. Because in my book, Letters from Marion, I also chronicle other people that have fallen under the drug laws. I mean, I met guys who grew marijuana that would, the kindest people in the world that were, I met them when they were 25 years old and they had another 15 years of left on their sentence. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I'm getting a little off the subject here, but I think that is a start because that's, you know, the United States. You know, how did we come to the United States? And we sort of like bucked the law
Of Britain.
England, and
Right.
that's kind of what Colorado is doing. They're saying, hey, this is our state, this is what we're doing. But I commend them for